In the early 70s, a 4-year-old orca was captured from the Puget Sound. Tokitae was forced to perform at an aquarium for the past 5 decades.
They came in the roundup in the 70s and took her. It's exactly what they did to our lactamus children by rounding them up and taking them to Indian resident boarding schools.
An indigenous tribe in the Northwest has been working for her return, and she could be coming home soon.
They're clearing her path home, and her lactamus culture is going to ready her spirit to make that journey.
It's not the first time we've brought a whale back to the Northwest.
Keiko touched down in Oregon just before 3 this afternoon.
But for Tokitae, it won't exactly be a return to the wild. Here's the story. I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, one of the great things about living in the Northwest is all the wildlife we have here. Tonight we're going to talk about whales and sea lions and salmon and safety and coming home. Now I know, doesn't feel like all those things would naturally go together, but they do. And tonight they make up our big story.
She lived through her capture and the death of her family. She lived through her other family members dying. And she lived through being in this small tank for so many years.
An orca captured from Puget Sound more than 50 years ago is coming home. For years, members of Washington's Lummi Nation have been fighting for the creature's release from the Miami Aquarium. And it's an effort that has spread across the globe. Now an agreement is in place to make it actually happen. Our sister station, King 5 in Seattle, has been covering this for decades. PJ Rondawa explains what it took to finally reach this point.
Born free in the Puget Sound, Tokitae was just 4 years old when she was captured in the San Juan Islands and sold to the Miami Seaquarium in the early 70s. Her new owners named her Lolita, and for the past 52 years, she's been languishing in this small Miami aquarium. More than 3,000 miles away from home.
It's me, Skila, your relative. I'm here to bring messages to you.
Members of the Lummi Nation have never stopped fighting and praying for Tokitae's return to the Salish Sea. To the Lummi, orcas are considered family, relatives under the waves.
When they came in the roundup in the 70s and took her, it's exactly what they did to our lactamus children by rounding them up and taking them to Indian resident boarding schools. He said, stripped them of their families, stripped them of their home, stripped them of their culture, of their traditional foods.
Thursday, Tokitae's corporate owners, the Dolphin Company, entered into a formal and binding agreement with nonprofit Friends of Lolita to return Tokitae to her native waters. CEO Eduardo Albor shared it was his daughter's reaction to seeing Tokitae in her small tank for the first time that pushed him to prioritize her health and release.
I cannot be more time here because this place is too small for Lolita. What do you mean? It is too small. I feel so bad. I have to go or I will cry. And she told me when we leave, if we ever take management of this place, you promise me that you will see how to improve this. I promise I will do it.
The pledge to bring Tokitae home comes in part because her health has improved thanks to a team of independent veterinarians. She's receiving specialized care for the first time.
We brought in some enrichment folks to help with the vets. In between everyone working together, she started to heal.
Morris and another elder have also been granted exclusive access to Tokitae on several occasions, serenading her with traditional drumming and cedar from the Salish Sea.
And I drummed and she stayed right in front of me.
Skelly Chuck tonight! Skelly Chuck tonight!
That's the first time she's been able to hear her lactamus language. to be able to get traditional healing.
When she comes home, the plan is for Tokitae to live in a large underwater pen in the San Juan Islands. The sea pen would be built with help from the nonprofit The Whale Sanctuary Project. Although construction for Tokitae's pen hasn't begun yet. But they are currently constructing a seaside sanctuary in Nova Scotia for whales retired from entertainment parks, and they're helping finalize plans for Tokitae Sea Pen 2.
And now that we have financial resources, what ancestors have told me is they're clearing her path home, and her Lactamish culture is going to ready her spirit to make that journey.
Morris says the signs of a homecoming on the horizon have been hard to miss.
This is your heartbeat, Skelly Chaktanat. This is my heartbeat. It's your mother's heartbeat.
During a prayer ceremony held earlier this year to let Tokitae's family know she is ready to come home, a sign too powerful to ignore.
About the time we were doing ceremony, they were there. The super pot. They know. They're getting ready.
Before Tokitae can return home to Washington, several federal agencies have to sign off on her move, including the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture. Morris is still, however, convinced that Tokitae could be home by the end of the year. For Facing Race, I'm PJ Randhawa.
Now, even though Morris, our expert there in the story, hopes it will all happen within a year, the company in charge of the move says actually it could take up to 2 years, and the cost is sure to be gargantuan. But some of that is being covered by an unlikely source, Jim Irsay, the owner of the NFL's Indianapolis Colts. He says the orca's story is near and dear to his heart, and he's proud to play a role in returning her home. Now, as great as all of this sounds, even advocates warn that Tokitae may never swim freely with her family, including the nearly century-old whale believed to be her mother. It would start with releasing her into an enclosure in the sea where she would receive round-the-clock care. Trainers say Tokitae would have to show them that she's ready to be released. And even if she did prove that, advocates would have to receive additional permits to release her into the wild, since the southern resident orcas are endangered. They would basically have to prove that adding another adult whale to the environment would not burden the small population any further. But the agreement to bring Tokitae home was an important first step that has now been overcome. Tokitae's story is very familiar to those of us who have lived here in Oregon for a while. Many remember Keiko, the star of the movie Free Willy, and his journey more than 2 decades ago in the late 90s. And while our sister station has covered Tokitae's journey closely, few stations have covered Keiko as closely as we did here at KGW. So we're heading to the vault to show you parts of Keiko's story that captivated so many here in the Pacific Northwest.
Cameras from around the world record what's considered an international event. Rain-soaked children and well-wishers wait in Newport to welcome Keiko to his new home. The killer whale has become an international symbol, a cause for animal advocates touched by his story and his plight, made public after the movie Free Willy.
And people figured out that he wasn't really free, as in the movie. They wanted to do something to help him, and that story's just been progressing for years, and it's just coming to a culmination now. It's building to a real crescendo.
Keiko spent 15 of his last 17 years in captivity, the last 10 here at this Mexico City amusement park, where his health has gone downhill. He's 2,000 pounds underweight, he has skin lesions, and in spite of the performances which have delighted Mexican crowds, his trainers say he's lethargic. Trainers at his new home say that's about to change.
They'll be working with him constantly all day long. They actually want to keep him a lot more active than he is in Mexico City. Down there between his shows, he basically just floats on top of the pool, kind of lazing around. He's a pretty lazy, bored whale, so we're not going to let him be bored here.
Keiko's days of performing are over. In Oregon, he'll be taught how to hunt, how to take care of himself, in the hopes he might someday be freed. But even the optimists say it's a long shot.
We don't know if it's possible or not. It's the first time it's ever going to be tried, and we hope it's a success. If not, Keiko will have a great home here for the rest of his life.
Keiko touched down in Oregon just before 3 this afternoon. As UPS workers unloaded their precious 3.5 tons of cargo, thousands of people lined the streets of Newport for a glimpse at their new celebrity neighbor.
I'm waiting to see my sweetheart, my darling, my precious Keiko.
And though he couldn't exactly be seen, Keiko's motorcade drew cheers.
We just want to see the whale come by. Really cool.
He's famous. He's coming to a better place for him, too. We're going to try and help him out.
Getting him out of his travel harness took some time, but after nearly an hour of maneuvering, Keiko entered his new, improved watery world. He seemed to take right away to the new surroundings. The next step is to nurse him back to health. You can see he has skin lesions. Plus, Keiko is 2,000 pounds underweight. Doctors here can't believe they have a chance to treat the star of Free Willy.
The number of people around the world that have been brought into the plight of Keiko, it just makes us feel an incredible sense of accomplishment. And we're just, I think we're just numb right now, but we feel like we've really done something special for this animal, and hopefully through that for the way people view all marine animals.
This particular marine animal seems to have a lot going for him.
As he leaps out of the water, it's almost as if Keiko knows he's finally headed home after nearly 2 decades in captivity. Keiko was only 2 in 1979 when he was plucked from the waters off Iceland. Now he's going back. The Prime Minister made it official after a year of negotiating with the foundation set up to make Free Willy truly free.
We're all very pleased. I feel as though the staff and I have had our foot nailed to the gas pedal and our hand on the emergency brake for the past month or so, waiting for an answer.
Beverly Hughes is president of the Free Willy Keiko Foundation. She says that the emergency brake is now off for good. Between now and the beginning of September, activity around Keiko's pen in Newport will be feverish. 450 different activities must take place to ready Keiko and Keiko's Bay pen in Iceland. Keiko's trainers take measurements of his blubber density, information that'll tell them how he's doing once he's moved from here. It's a tight time schedule. Construction nearly round the clock in Iceland, hard training in Newport. All must be in readiness in less than 3 months.
So we know that if we can't accomplish this by a certain date in September, then we must wait until spring.
And says Beverly Hughes, even though Keiko is moving one step closer to freedom, it doesn't assure he'll one day swim the open ocean again.
We are only moving him to another captive situation, so there is no proof right now. We're just going to move him to a better, it's been a wonderful life here. We're going to enhance that one more time.
This monumental day for Keiko started like any other, with a routine workout. Trainers say the unsuspecting Keiko eagerly swam into his medical pen, and his trainers easily slipped a sling around him. His journey had begun. Keiko's covered in ointment to help keep him wet. Trainers give every attention to detail and safety. They keep him cool, dumping buckets of ice into his temporary tank. Although this is goodbye to Oregon's beloved whale, the Free Willy Foundation says the Oregon Coast Aquarium should be proud.
This whale, when he arrived in Newport, was in relatively poor health, and for instance, he could only hold his breath for about 3 minutes when he arrived. Today, he can hold his breath for almost 20 minutes, so he's a dramatically different whale.
He's healthier, he's bigger, and we wish him all the luck in the world going to Iceland.
Not only has Keiko's health improved well in Oregon, his fame has as well. As the caravan moved out of the Oregon Coast Aquarium, Keiko's fans say farewell. Then Keiko's caravan heads to the Newport Airport. Inside his 28-foot by 8-foot tank, affectionately called his cradle, Keiko is surrounded by his trainers. 5 of them will move with him to Iceland. Keiko's transportation to Iceland is an enormous C-17. This Free Willy operation is arguably the most money spent on an animal, at least $12 million so far. But the Free Willy Foundation says what it stands for is priceless.
It is really showing the best side of the humankind. We're going into phase 2, which means we have succeeded.
The huge Air Force C-17 cargo plane with Keiko aboard landed at just before 3 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. in Jaime, Iceland. The landing was rough, the plane blew tires, but the 9,050-pound precious cargo handled the flight just fine. Fully an hour and 15 minutes later, the killer whale and his temporary tank emerged out of the plane's cargo hold. Just before noon, Icelandic time, crews transferred Keiko onto a flatbed truck for the ride overland. And then a procession very similar to the one that left the Oregon Coast Aquarium yesterday afternoon, headed toward the bay Keiko now will call home. On the road that leads from the airport, you can see the procession dwarfed by the C-17's tail in the background. The Keiko caravan dipped into the town of Jaime. The streets were lined with curious Icelanders, their country and their town in the international spotlight. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Iceland, Keiko was lifted onto a barge for the voyage to his new home. It took another 40 minutes before Keiko was lifted from his temporary traveling tank into the waters where he was born. The assembled crew and caretakers and onlookers cheered. Keiko at first swam somewhat lethargically, then picked up the pace, apparently becoming more comfortable by the minute. A handler played with the whale and rubbed off some of the balm applied to keep his skin moist during the long trip. It was the end of an incredible journey from Iceland to Canada to Mexico to Oregon, and now home again.
After Keiko arrived in Iceland, trainers would launch fish around his pen with a slingshot. Eventually, they began escorting him on long swims into the open ocean. They said Keiko would approach other orcas, but he always returned to the trainer's boat and generally sought out humans instead of his own kind. He did make a journey to Norway on his own. That's nearly 1,000 miles. But once there, he was again attracted to boats and people. Keiko died of suspected pneumonia 5 years after his journey back to Iceland. At least one expert from the Greenland Institute of Natural Resources who studied Keiko's release said she's pessimistic about Tokitae's chances after learning to hunt after 52 years of being hand-fed by humans. But there are a few key differences between Tokitae and Keiko. Tokitae was slightly older when she was captured, so she may still have already learned how to hunt, and she might remember that. She also might remember her family songs. And since the plan is to rehabilitate her in an area where her family is somewhat nearby, experts say there's a chance that she could recognize their calls and be all the more determined to get back to them, and perhaps to live out her days the way she was meant to, in the wild.
Up next on The Story, our wildlife coverage continues with a story about sea lions in the Columbia River.
Whoever was driving it, they went right through the pack of the first one, and then it was kind of like a slalom to hit every pack.
It's a story that had thousands on social media outraged that someone would intentionally try to hit sea lions bobbing up and down in the water. Why it was likely a crime caught on camera, even though state wildlife officials have killed hundreds of the animals over the past 15 years. We'll explain when the story continues.
Welcome back. Keeping with our wildlife and water theme, let's get to some of this distressing video from the Columbia River, where one of our viewers witnessed what they believe to be a fisherman off Hayden Island purposely driving his boat over groups of sea lions. Sure is what it looks like to me, too. There are multiple investigations now underway. Our Daisy Calabero caught up with the man who recorded the video, and she spotted someone else doing the exact same thing.
You know, I just caught a boat coming under the bridge, full speed, and I'm like, no, don't be heading for those guys.
A Portland man captured this gut-wrenching video of a boat with fishing gear weaving back and forth, intentionally trying to hit dozens of sea lions swimming around Hayden Island Monday. Sea lions are a federally protected species under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, making it illegal to harass, hunt, or kill any marine mammals.
Whoever was driving it, they went right through the pack of the first one, and then it was kind of like a slalom to hit every pack. And I just looked around me and everybody was devastated.
The man behind the camera is Michael Brady, a former fisherman himself. He says the driver of the boat had no logical reason to aim for and hit the sea lions the way he did in this video.
I see both sides of it. I understand the frustrations. I understand this year's tough on salmon. Lower coast, I think, is even closed for a lot of people. But I think this was a sport fisherman who has just had a little chip on his shoulder. And, you know, it was terrible to witness as a community here.
And while we were out getting video today in the same spot, we witnessed another boat targeting groups of sea lions bobbing in the water. They scrambled away when it was right on top of them. According to NOAA, which oversees fishery management, a fisherman can scare off seals and sea lions from damaging gear or impacting them while actively fishing. They can do it by using horns, bells, and whistles or circling the mammals without physically harming them. The Oregon State Marine Board, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and NOAA are all aware of this video and are investigating, but tell KGW they couldn't comment at this time. As for Brady, he would like to see the driver of the boat held accountable for trying to harm the sea lions.
But the competition with the sea lions is, I think, what the fishermen that would view things like a threat, they feel like they're competition. And I'm just going to say nature was here first. That's all.
Daisy Caballero, KGW News.
Now, even though sea lions are federally protected, some native tribes and wildlife officials in Oregon and Washington are actually allowed to kill the animals. We'll explain why that program came about and how many sea lions have been removed, in their words, when the story returns. Let's get back to talking about sea lions, and in this case, the legal way that the states of Oregon and Washington actually kill the animals in certain circumstances. Why, you ask? Well, it's all about the fish that they're gorging themselves on. Sea lion populations have soared in recent decades, but salmon and steelhead, they have not. Many of the fish they eat are from 13 threatened and endangered runs, protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act. Many of the animals simply wait at the Bonneville Dam, Willamette Falls, or other pinch points where the fish gather as they make their way upriver. ODFW says sea lions eat up to 44% of the Columbia River Spring Chinook run and 25% of the Willamette Winter Steelhead run each year. They are a huge headache to people who fish, sometimes snatching fish right off of their lines as they're trying to reel the fish in. The Federal Marine Mammal Protection Act was amended in 1994 to allow states to apply for lethal removal authority under pretty narrow circumstances. And in 2018, Congress amended it again to allow for more flexibility to kill the sea lions at these pinch points like the dams or the falls. The removal or killing of sea lions has been going on at Bonneville Dam since 2008 and started at Willamette Falls about a decade later. For a few years, repeat offenders were branded with a hot iron in order to track how many times they were a problem at the dam before they were killed. Now, it's important to note that killing the animals was not the first course of action. Wildlife officials have tried all kinds of non-lethal methods, also known as hazing, to deter the animals. They've tried exclusion gates, using things like fireworks to try and scare them off, rubber buckshot shot out of a 12-gauge shotgun, and even putting the sea lions in cages and then driving them over 100 miles back out to the coast. In several cases, the same creatures were right back at the dinner table in just a matter of days. So they don't even bother with that one anymore. ODFW says they first trap the animals, and from there are two choices. The first option is to place them in an accredited zoo or aquarium, but if no facility is available, they are taken to an indoor facility and chemically euthanized by a veterinarian. Wildlife officials also have the authority to tranquilize the animal with a dart before euthanizing them. Until 2020, they could only be killed if they were gathering at Bonneville Dam or Willamette Falls. Now the feds have issued a permit to Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and 6 regional tribes to kill the animals in certain zones across the Columbia River Basin, stretching from the I-205 bridge to east of Umatilla, so a huge stretch of the river, as well as any tributary in the Columbia where endangered species are spawning. Those zones include locations where endangered salmon and steelhead, sturgeon, and lamprey are especially vulnerable. ODFW says removing sea lions was a significant factor in 2020 for the best return of wild Willamette steelhead in years, after biologists believed they were on the verge of extinction. Nearly 400 sea lions have been killed by wildlife crews in Oregon, 277 before 2020 and then 99 since. In an email, ODFW tells us they will begin trapping more sea lions later this month at both the Bonneville Dam and Willamette Falls. Efforts to stop the state from killing the animals have fallen short. The Humane Society of the U.S. sued in federal court back in 2008, but lost. So the program continues. What do you think about the state killing sea lions in order to protect endangered fish? How about the fishermen trying to hit the animals in the story we showed you earlier? Send us your thoughts, will you? Send an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. In the meantime, keep it right here. We're going to wrap things up right after this.
Next at 6:30, we're following breaking news that shut down 2 different parts of I-5 today. That includes this landslide that hit 2 vehicles in Clark County this afternoon, plus the deadly police shooting that blocked the interstate near Salem for hours. Then
it's getting rougher and rougher out there driving around.
A radio cab driver is stabbed on the job. What we've learned about the suspect, who was in jail just last week. KGW News at 6:30 is next.
That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.